The network canceled it the same year it won an Emmy. Not in its first season, when the ratings were uncertain. Not after a decade of fading viewership. In the same year, the cinematography team was up for another award. The same year, new fans were still finding it on streaming. That's when National Geographic pulled the plug on the most decorated unscripted show in its history. The show was Life Below Zero. 12 years, 23 seasons, 9 Emmy wins, 325 episodes, and a cast of real people living in the Alaskan wilderness who never needed a camera crew to survive. What happened to the show, and what happened to the people on it, is a story that says as much about the television industry as it does about Alaska. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly why one of cable TV's longest-running hits ended without a proper goodbye, and what every person who was ever on it is doing right now. Not yet. It began in the summer of 2013, with 6 people who had no idea they were about to become household names. Life Below Zero premiered on National Geographic on May 19, 2013. The concept was simple on paper. A British production company, BBC Studios, would send camera crews into the most remote corners of Alaska to document people who had chosen to live entirely off the land. No safety net, no grocery stores, no neighbors within driving distance, because there were no roads. Just subsistence hunters and trappers doing what they had done for years before anyone was filming. The original cast was built around 3 distinct stories. Sue Aikens was the sole occupant of Kavik River Camp, a remote hunting outpost and pilot refueling stop located 97 miles north of the Arctic Circle, closer to the North Pole than to most Alaskan cities. Chip and Agnes Hailstone lived in Norvik, a small community near the Kobuk River, where Agnes, an Inupiaq woman who had never lived anywhere else, raised 7 children on subsistence harvesting. Andy Bassick had built a kennel and homestead at Calico Bluff on the Yukon River, maintaining a pack of more than 24 sled dogs as his primary means of winter travel. Eric Salitan and Glenn Villeneuve rounded out the early lineup, each living by different methods in different corners of the state. What Nat Geo and BBC Studios had not fully anticipated was how completely the show would absorb its audience. People who had never thought about Alaska began scheduling their Tuesday nights around it. The appeal wasn't manufactured drama or elimination rounds. It was the opposite. It was watching capable, experienced people face genuine problems in an environment that did not care whether they were on television or not. The first season drew strong numbers. The second drew stronger. By season 3, Life Below Zero was Nat Geo's highest-rated unscripted series. By season 5, it was generating enough interest to justify a long-term production deal and multiple spin-offs. And none of the people at the center of it had made any changes to how they lived. That was the point. And if you think the origin story is the simple part of this, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. Not yet point. The show's longevity came from the specificity of the people on it, and from how much was happening in their lives that the edit never fully revealed. Sue Aikens had been living at Kavik River Camp long before any producer ever called her. She first moved to Alaska at age 12 when her mother relocated the family north of Fairbanks, and then left. Aikens, at 12 years old, learned to provide for herself in the Alaskan interior. By the time Life Below Zero found her, she had been at Kavik for years, operating the camp alone through winters that dropped to 60 below, fueling small aircraft, and managing an outpost that sits on a gravel bar in one of the most isolated stretches of the Arctic. Her most defining moment came years before filming began. In 2007, Aikens went to the river to pump water. She set her rifle down to operate the pump with both hands. A grizzly bear she had been monitoring, it had been burying caribou carcasses on her helipad, came down the bank and attacked her. It bit into her head, dislocated both of her hips, and left her seriously injured and alone. There was no crew nearby. She sutured her own wounds, shot the bear, called the Alaska State Troopers, and then waited. For 10 days, she was airlifted out after a passing pilot finally found her. She still carries the physical evidence of what that bear did to her skull. That story alone explained why millions of people trusted her. It was not performed toughness. It was documented reality. The Hailstone family carried a different weight. Chip Hailstone, born in Kalispell, Montana, had moved to Alaska at 19 after reading about the state's hunting grounds. He met Agnes in Kotzebue, married her, and became part of an Inupiaq family that had lived subsistence lives in Norvik for generations. Agnes was the only original cast member who was born in the place the cameras were filming. Everyone else had arrived from somewhere else. She was already there. Jesse Holmes joined the show in its third season. He had moved to Alaska from Sylacauga, Alabama in 2004 and settled near Nenana, about 50 miles southwest of Fairbanks, where he built a kennel and dedicated himself to competitive dog mushing. His earnings from the show went directly into expanding his racing team. Each of them had built a life that existed independent of the cameras. That distinction would matter when the cameras stopped. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got. Until now. Behind the carefully crafted footage of Arctic survival, there were two major storylines involving cast members that the production handled quietly, and that most casual viewers never fully understood. The first involved Chip Hailstone. In 2011, before Life Below Zero had become a cultural phenomenon, a dispute in Norvik involving Chip's stepson and daughter led to a confrontation with Alaska state troopers. Chip alleged that a trooper had physically grabbed his then 17-year-old daughter Tinmiak, and he filed statements with law enforcement making specific claims about the incident. Those claims were investigated, disputed by other officers present, and ultimately charged as false. Chip was convicted of 2 counts of perjury and 2 counts of making false statements. In July 2017, while Life Below Zero was airing its 11th season, Chip was sentenced to 15 months at the Anchorage Correctional Complex. He served approximately 10 months before his release in early 2018. During his incarceration, the production continued filming without him. Agnes continued providing for the family alone, hunting, fishing, managing the household, while the show quietly shifted focus away from any direct explanation of where Chip had gone. He returned to the show after his release and remained until the final episode. The second backstory centered on Sue Aikens. In February 2017, she filed a lawsuit against the show's production company, alleging that producers had pressured her into performing dangerous scenarios for the sake of dramatic footage, including a staged snow machine crash that resulted in genuine injury. Her lawsuit framed her treatment as that of someone considered expendable when the resulting footage was compelling enough. The legal action was eventually settled, and Aikens returned to the show, where she remained through its final season. Neither of these situations destroyed the show. The audience, for the most part, stayed. But they illustrated something that was easy to overlook while watching footage of people enduring brutal Arctic conditions. The relationship between the cast and the production was more complicated than the screen suggested. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. By the late 2010s, Life Below Zero was not a show, it was a brand. National Geographic and BBC Studios had formalized a multi-series production deal in 2020, publicly announcing a 3-series commitment that would extend the franchise well into the next decade. Alongside the flagship series, 2 spin-offs were in active production. Life Below Zero, Next Generation launched in September 2020, following younger people who had recently made the transition to off-grid living in Alaska, including cast members across the Kenai Coast, the Brooks Range, and the Yukon Flats. Life Below Zero, First Alaskans debuted in 2022 as the franchise's first series centered entirely on Alaska Native cast members, described by Nat Geo as the first nonfiction series of its kind. Port Protection Alaska ran as a companion series covering a small Southeast Alaskan community. At its peak, the franchise was operating 4 simultaneous shows, all produced by BBC Studios, all airing on National Geographic. The Emmy nominations kept coming, 21 in total across the franchise's run, with wins in cinematography every few years. The show's camera team became arguably the most decorated in the history of reality television for that single technical category. The spin-offs were also generating their own loyal audiences. Fans who had come to the franchise through Next Generation were discovering the original. Viewers of First Alaskans were finding characters they had never seen centered in that kind of storytelling before. The infrastructure looked durable. Then Disney made a decision that had nothing to do with ratings. One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything. The explanation for Life Below Zero's cancellation does not involve declining viewership, creative exhaustion, or cast departures. It involves a corporate strategy meeting and a spreadsheet. Disney acquired 21st Century Fox in 2019, and with it came National Geographic, the channel, the brand, and all of its existing production relationships. Among those relationships was the long-standing deal with BBC Studios to produce Life Below Zero and its spin-offs. BBC Studios is a commercial subsidiary of the BBC, headquartered in London. It produced the show from the beginning. It owned the production infrastructure, the format, and significant rights connected to the franchise. From Disney's perspective, that was the problem. Beginning in 2023 and accelerating through 2024, Disney undertook a company-wide cost reduction effort targeting $7.5 billion in savings. National Geographic was not insulated from those cuts. Approximately 13% of Nat Geo's workforce was laid off in 2024. Programming decisions were reviewed against a straightforward financial principle. Disney would prioritize content it owned outright. A show produced by a British media company and licensed to Nat Geo, generating strong ratings but owned by someone else, did not fit the new model. Wicked Tuna, which had run for 13 seasons, was canceled. The Incredible Dr. Pol, which had run for 24 seasons on Nat Geo Wild, ended in July 2024. Life Below Zero was next. National Geographic did not make a formal announcement. Cast members found out through their own production contacts. Chip Hailstone broke the news publicly on X on September 21, 2024, writing that the show had run its course and that there was no contract, no Life Below Zero. Rico DeWilde confirmed in a November 2024 Instagram post that Disney, which owns Nat Geo, had canceled the show and that BBC Studios was reportedly exploring whether another network might pick it up, though DeWilde expressed doubt, citing the complexity involved. Season 23 premiered on October 8, 2024. The final episode aired February 23, 2025. Nat Geo never made an official statement confirming the cancellation even as the last season aired, and that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around her saw coming. The final season of Life Below Zero aired in a strange atmosphere. The show's regular viewers knew from Chip Hailstone's social media post that this was the end. The network had said nothing. New episodes aired on Tuesday nights as scheduled, and the stories continued as if there would be a season 24. There would not be. What made season 23 unusual beyond the cancellation was its cast. Because the spin-offs, Next Generation, First Alaskans, and Port Protection, had already been canceled, Nat Geo consolidated surviving cast from those shows into the flagship's final run. Johnny Rolfe, who had built his Yukon Flats existence as a solitary trapper on Next Generation, joined the main show. The Roach family and Gage and Avery Hoffman from First Alaskans also appeared. For cast members who had spent years on the spin-offs, season 23 of the original series became both a reunion and a farewell they had not planned for. The people who had been on the show the longest, Akins, the Hailstones, Basich, navigated a final season with the same approach they had brought to every other season. They did the work in front of them. Akins prepared Kavik for winter. The Hailstones fished under the ice. Basich maintained his kennel at Calico Bluff. The cameras documented it, as they always had. When the final episode aired on February 23, 2025, 12 years of consistent unscripted television from the Alaskan wilderness ended without a structured finale, without reunion footage, without a goodbye episode. It simply stopped. The network moved on. The people in Alaska did what they had always done. They kept going. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The measure of Life Below Zero, and the thing that distinguished it from most reality television, is what happened to its cast after the cameras left. Jesse Holmes had used his earnings from the show to fund his racing kennel. He had been entering the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race every year since 2018, steadily improving. In 2025, just weeks after the show's final episode aired, Holmes entered the 53rd Iditarod, which due to limited snowpack had been extended from the traditional 1,000 miles to a record 1,129 miles, making it the longest Iditarod ever run. He crossed the finish line in Nome on March 14, 2025, in 10 days, 14 hours, 55 minutes, and 41 seconds. He won. First place. Then in March 2026, he won it again, back-to-back Iditarod championships, becoming only the third competitor in the race's history to win consecutive titles. He was 43 years old, based in Nenana, Alaska, and had been building toward those victories the entire time the show was running. Sue Akins returned to Kavik River Camp after the cancellation and has continued operating it through the 2025 season, managing the fuel supply, maintaining the runway, and accepting the periodic supply runs to Fairbanks that have always been part of her rhythm. In early 2026, she published a memoir, North of Ordinary, co-written with author Michael Vlesides. It marked her transition from a television personality into something with a longer shelf life, a documented record of her own account of 40-plus years in the Alaskan wilderness. The Hailstone family remained in Norvik. Chip launched a traditional ulu-making workshop, building blades from spring steel and teaching the craft to others. Agnes and the family continued the subsistence cycle: caribou, muskrat, whitefish, sheefish, that had never changed regardless of whether cameras were present. Andy Bassick and Denise Becker are still at Calico Bluff on the Yukon River. Eric Salatan and his wife Martha May now run a fishing lodge in Iliamna. Glenn Villeneuve relocated to Fairbanks. No main cast member of the original series has died. The show's full run, all 23 seasons, is currently streaming on Disney+, Hulu, and Amazon Prime Video. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. Life Below Zero won 9 Emmy Awards. It ran for 12 years. It launched 4 spin-offs. It documented a way of life that most of its viewers would never live: subsistence hunting, ice fishing, dog mushing, and survival in temperatures that punish every mistake. And it ended because a company in Burbank, California decided that a show it didn't fully own was no longer a strategic priority. The cast had always existed outside the television frame. That's what the show was actually about. Sue Aikens was surviving grizzly attacks and managing remote fuel depots before Nat Geo arrived. Agnes Hailstone was fishing the Kobuk River and raising children in Nurvik before a single producer called. Jesse Holmes was training dogs and entering races long before the show gave him a wider platform, and his show earnings went straight back into the kennel that eventually won him 2 Iditards. The production documented something real. It also created tension around that reality: lawsuits, edited absences, and cast members finding out about cancellations from social media rather than network executives. The relationship between television and the people television profits from is rarely clean. What the end of Life Below Zero clarified is that the show needed the people more than the people needed the show. The land was there before the cameras arrived. The skills were already built. The lives were already lived. Nat Geo canceled the contract. The Alaskans canceled nothing. 12 years is a long time for any television show to hold its audience. And Life Below Zero held it without manufactured conflict, without elimination rounds, without reunion specials, and without a single season filmed anywhere other than Alaska in winter. What happens next for the cast is already in motion. Jesse Holmes is training for a potential three-peat at the Iditarod. Sue Aikens is on a book tour. The Hailstones are processing caribou in Norvik. Andy Bassick is at Calico Bluff. The life continues, exactly as it always did, with or without cameras, with or without a network, with or without a contract. The real question the cancellation raised isn't whether Disney made the right business decision. It's this: when a show documents people surviving without television, and then television takes itself away, does anything actually change for them? Do you think Life Below Zero should have been picked up by another network, or has that story run its natural course? Let me know below.